This program is about unsolved cyber mysteries. What you're about to see is not a vulnerability report.
It's Unsolved Cyber Mysteries, Volume 2. These days, we're all at least somewhat familiar with the realities of activist hacking. There are organizations like WikiLeaks that have revealed highly sensitive military and political data to the world. And then there's Anonymous, the hacker collective that's broken into hundreds of systems to protest against everything from police brutality to the war in Ukraine.
The ongoing invasion of Ukraine has shown that your regime has no respect for human rights.
But hacktivism hasn't always been a thing. And in this episode, we're taking a look at the OG example of how hacking can be used to get your message across, even when people might not want to hear it. The year was 1989, and the world was very much on edge. The Berlin Wall was about to come down, and the Cold War was about to come to a tenuous end. Earlier that year, the Tiananmen Square massacre in China had shocked the world, and in Alaska, Exxon Valdez had just leaked 11 million gallons of oil into the Prince William Sound. Clearly, there was a lot to protest about, including the upcoming launch of NASA's Galileo probe, which was scheduled to launch on October 18th. The plan was a mission to Jupiter. Controversy surrounded the ambitious mission, as many saw the plutonium-powered satellite as the first step towards the nuclearization of space. And so it was that on the morning of October 16th, employees at NASA and dozens of other agencies that shared the space agency's network found a bizarre message popping up on their screen. Your system has been officially wanked. And the alarm went out.
Your call sounded kind of urgent.
I hope this isn't going to sound crazy.
In the space business, what isn't a little crazy sometimes?
This crazy was the first appearance of the notorious wank worm. And hey, no giggling, like this is serious business. As I was saying, the wank worm would soon spread to hundreds of systems and nodes around the world and become the very first cybersecurity story to capture international public attention. But let's back it up. It's followed up by the twerk worm. But let's back up. What is a worm exactly? In the simplest terms, a worm is a piece of malicious code that first infiltrates a computer and then replicates itself to spread to any other computers it can find, usually on the same or adjacent networks. This process repeats itself until it runs out of things to infect. Given enough time and enough connections, a worm can spread to tens of thousands of computers by exploiting faults and backdoors in its target system. Data engineers at NASA had actually seen worms before, most famously in 1988 when they found the very first publicly known worm, the Morris worm, on their systems.
Morris's defense includes that he intended only a low-grade prank. What he touched off instead was a rampant epidemic last November that infected a national defense network of computers, among others.
But the Morris worm was really kind of benign. It just sat there making copies of itself and occasionally crashed the system when it filled up the available memory. Or there was the aptly named ping pong virus, which attacks systems at an Italian university before spreading or ping-ponging to other computers. But this wank worm was a whole other story. Not only was it replicating within NASA's systems and the systems attached to NASA, but it also came with a message, or more accurately, messages. WANK was an acronym for Worms Against Nuclear Killers, and it didn't take a rocket scientist, although in this case many were likely available, to figure out that this was an activist attack pitched straight at NASA and their nuclear-powered probe. The wank worm was also programmed to deliver any of 99 random messages to the screens of infected computers, including, "Vote anarchist! If you win at the rat race, you're still a rat." And importantly, you talk of times of peace for all and then prepare for war. This last quote is notable because it ultimately confirmed a growing suspicion that the wank worm had originally come from Australia, my homeland, just in case wank didn't give it away.
Casey, where were you at the time of this event?
I'm not available for questions. These words are lyrics from a song by Midnight Oil, a very popular Australian protest rock band that was also known for its anti-establishment political leanings. Some nice moves there. And by the way, that singer, Peter Garrett, he ran for the Australian Parliament as candidate for the Nuclear Disarmament Party and later won a seat as a member of the Labor Party, which should give you just a small sense of how heated the debate around nuclear issues was at the time. So why did suspicion turn towards Australia? There were a couple of reasons. Australia had only recently connected to the SPAN network that NASA used, the network that ultimately helped to spread the worm, so there was an access opportunity. More interestingly, a deliberate choice had been made in the worm itself. Whoever introduced the worm into NASA's systems had deliberately programmed it so it would not attack DECnet node 48 on the SPAN network. Who was node 48? It was the nation of New Zealand. This was significant because just the year before, New Zealand had declared itself a nuclear weapons-free country, which was interpreted as a major act of diplomatic defiance against the United States. And by the way, everyone thinks that New Zealand is Australia, so they obviously blamed Australia. This also reinforced the belief that the wank worm was one of the world's very first examples of hacktivism. Meanwhile, back at NASA, terrified systems managers began deleting their own files in case the worm was able to corrupt or copy sensitive information. The Jet Propulsion Lab, an invaluable NASA asset, pulled itself off the SPAN network entirely, resulting in all work having to be conducted by telephone. The wank worm had proven incredibly effective. However, average citizens didn't really understand what was going on, even though the press made it into headline news. All this did was stir up worries about national security and fuel speculation about cyber attacks by foreign nations. On the flip side, the thriving anti-nuclear movement praised the worm as the meeting point of activism and the digital age, a glorious new tool in the war against global nuclear annihilation. It's safe to say that they'd probably never seen war games.
Shall we play a game?
Global thermonuclear war.
But you can bet the authorities had seen war games, and they wanted none of it. They wanted to nail these wankers hard. In coordination with international agencies, the Australian Federal Police launched a state-of-the-art investigation that very soon led to the doorstep of a hacking group known as The Realm. Their principal target was a Realm hacker named Nishon Evan Hayam, who went by the alias of Phoenix. Using electronic surveillance, the AFP tapped in on calls and emails in which Phoenix bragged to other hackers about how easy it was to get into NASA's systems. Ultimately, Phoenix pled guilty to 15 charges, which included intrusions into NASA's systems and many others. But the authorities lacked sufficient proof to charge him or his associates with the wankworm hack. While the thinking at the time assumed that Phoenix and the Realm were the source of the wankworm intrusion, modern-day sleuths, often working with Freedom of Information Act releases, have speculated that Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks and just another blonde Aussie hacker, might have been behind the attacks. And that thought brings us back to the present day, where the risks, costs, and reasons associated with hacktivism continue to be daunting. And these reasons aren't as simple as the ones we often think about when we think about the risk of hacking. One of the key things that makes hacktivism different from financially or impacts or even just lulz motivated hacking is that the people that are doing it truly believe that they are doing the right thing. After a long and public reign as hacktivist and free speech poster boy, Julian Assange has been imprisoned in England for over 3 years, where he awaits possible extradition to the United States. And NSA whistleblower Ed Snowden, who incidentally has excellent choice in glasses, currently lives in self-imposed exile in Russia after his attempts to bring government secrets to light. Elsewhere, hacker journalists and investigators like those at Netherlands-based Bellingcat are doing incredible work in the name of justice. They're using open source data to reveal incredible new truths about the world we live in and paint a picture for the public that otherwise would never be seen. In all likelihood, it was inevitable that hacking, activism, and the pursuit of agendas, both the ones we agree with and the ones we don't, would ultimately become a major feature of the digital age. And what a long way we've come since early intrusions like the wankworm first made people sit up and pay attention. Nonetheless, our attention continues to be necessary as threat actors continue to outpace our ability to stay secure. Until next time, I'm Casey Ellis. Stay curious.